the liberals' favorite part of the Constitution, the Commerce Clause, under which they've done all this stuff. Nevertheless, my doctor friend, who's a billionaire, fears that the government could come in and bust him up and say, you're paying that one too much, you're not paying this one too much, you're not paying this one enough. Now, they don't have the authority to do that under the Constitution. It violates due process.
And they probably wouldn't do it to this guy, except they might.
Well, that's the fear that he and his wealthy partner/investors have.
So you then say, look, I've got my billion, I'll live on my boat.
Right. Their investment will be diminished by government interference. Now, they are not harmed because they have the billion. Would they like to make a few more? Of course. But they have employed thousands of people at very, very good jobs, averaging $150,000 to $250,000 a year, who now are out of work because my investor friends, the doctor and his buddies, fear what the government will do to them.
And more importantly, maybe the cool new knee replacement that I was hoping for coming down the road won't be invented yet, because why risk $1 billion if
Did you have to say knees? I told you I just had surgery on my knee. I had an arthroscopic surgery where, you know, they put a camera in one end and a scalpel in the other, and they do the whole thing on television. As my grandfather would have said, just like we had in the old country, they did your surgery on television. Tom Woods joins us now from the Mises Institute in Auburn, Alabama. Tom, you're joined by Jerry Celente and John Stossel. Welcome back to Freedom Watch.
My pleasure, Judge.
We were just talking about a conversation I had last night with a banker whom I think you know, but he asked me not to use his name, who's the chair and CEO of one of the 10 largest bank holding companies in the United States. Their assets are about $250 billion. They have no subprime loans. They have no bad debts of which they are aware. They don't engage in any credit default swaps. They don't want any federal assistance. The FDIC called them in and said, you will issue a class of stock just for the government, and you will sell it to us. And he begged them to let him run his bank as he saw fit. And he begged his board of trustees, his board of directors, to let him go tell the feds to take a hike. But the feds said, if you don't issue this stock and issue it just to us, we will audit you for the next 5 years. It will cost you millions in employee time, bad PR, and the consequential loss of business. So the board caved. Isn't that extortion?
Well, certainly it is, but I mean, how can anybody be surprised at anything that goes on in the United States at this point? I read an article a couple of weeks ago about a bank in Massachusetts. I wish I could remember the name so as to help promote it. But this was a bank that was extremely sound. In fact, it was only lending like 28 cents on the dollar instead of 90 cents. So he was really keeping his powder dry, being sensible. He was even able to, the bank president was even able to eke out a small profit that year. And the FDIC has gone in and is penalizing him for being too prudent. So we're being told that we need more regulators. We need more regulation. The regulators are as clueless as anybody else. If the whole system is going to rest on the thin reed of a bunch of blockhead regulators, we are in serious trouble. What we need is a free market of profit and loss, and we need a free market also in money. It's the Federal Reserve and all the funny money it throws into the economy that discombobulates us in the first place. We need to go to the root causes. Isn't that what the left is always talking about normally, the root causes? Well, there it is. It's Ben Bernanke smiling at you in the camera.
Doesn't anybody understand that the government doesn't know how to run a business? They own 80% of slightly under 80% of AIG. The House publicly condemned it. The House voted to seize assets from it. The government is trashing it. The president is blasting it. Will they do this to other businesses that they own, Stossel?
Well, I think AIG is too complicated for the public to get that government doesn't run business as well. But you'd think we would have learned something from the Russians trying to run steel mills and airlines. It always failed. The best car they could produce was the Trabant, which was so bad that you had to put the oil and gas in separately and shake the car to mix them together. And this was those brilliant East German engineers. Governments suck at running things, but we haven't explained it to people.
So I'm going to go to my car shop, my car dealer, and bring in my car and say, I need 2 new tires, and I'm going to sign a piece of paper, which is basically a contract, in which they'll say, yes, we'll put these 2 new tires on for you. It'll be done by such and such a date. and here's what you pay us. And let's say it's $200 a tire. I come back and the bill is for $1,500. And the guy says, well, the federal inspectors were here, and they didn't like the contract that we signed. They thought that we didn't charge you enough. And by the way, in their opinion, you needed a new carburetor, and you needed a new oil filter, and you needed a new drive shaft, as well as 2 new tires.
Won't the public say the federal inspectors must be right? They must know better. They wouldn't have said that.
Is this a legitimate fear, Tom Woods, that the everyday, hardworking, blue-collar American could end up in a dilemma like the one I just described?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it seems to me, I used to think that Gerald Celente was being, too pessimistic, and I felt like Mr. Sunshine compared to him. But, it seems like when you have a regime that does the exact opposite of what common sense would indicate in every opportunity it has, how can we expect a good outcome? I mean, I actually considered writing a book on how to learn basic economics by reading what the government tells you and then believing the exact opposite.
Well, let's look at the facts. Show me one success that Washington could pin on and say, look at the great job we did. Oh, Katrina, wonderful job. Oh, the World Trade Center. Boy, did they build it bigger and better before. Oh, they're doing a great job with these wars.
World War II. They always cite World War II.
Yeah. But, I mean, that's, we're talking ancient history now. We're talking what has the governments done in our lifetime as adults that they could show one great success and say, look at this. Look at the great job that we do. Who are the people? Who are the people? Oh, Larry Summers. Oh, yeah, great. What was his last job? He got fired from Harvard, one of the Clinton administration guys. I mean, you go through the whole list. It's people fail their way to the top. And so, I mean, now Congress is going to work together. Oh, great. Who's Congress? Pelosi, Frank, Bonner, this one, that one. How about Mo, Larry, and Curly?
Wait a second. Is that the point? I mean, you're talking about the individuals, and some of them, I think, are awful. I agree with you. But it's even if they were geniuses, the incentives of government are the problem. It's
well,
not
their incentives are to have these jobs with 100 aides and having a cushy life that none of us could ever imagine.
Rather than the incentive.
Just a second, because we're going to lose the satellite with Tom in just a minute, and Congressman Paul will come in. What will it take for people to recognize that government, as Ronald Reagan said, is the problem and not the solution?
Well, frankly, we need a lot more broadcasts like this one, because everybody's being told this is the free market's fault. I mean, we've all hear this same absurd refrain repeated over and over, so it's become the conventional wisdom. But we need there to be a groundswell of, frankly, intellectuals, journalists, and people who have some kind of a clue getting out there, explaining the basics of what happened. And I think the easy way to do that is to start by saying anybody who was telling you whether he was, trying to, in other words, whether he was lying to you to try to keep the system going or whether he really believed that everything was great, those people should be disqualified from saying anything about the economy for the next 10 years. Anybody who's left, well, that's about a handful of us. And those people should be allowed to and should be encouraged to, in fact, participate in the policy-making world. Whereas, in fact, I don't see Peter Schiff's phone ringing off the hook. I don't hear Ron Paul's phone ringing off the hook. So we need to expose the fact that everybody who's running the show has been utterly clueless, with Ben Bernanke, Hank Paulson, Alan Greenspan, the whole bunch of them, and that they have the nerve to claim that they have the answers to a crisis they produced is just unbelievable to me.
If you want to read more about the arguments, the eloquent arguments, the likes of which you just heard from Professor Woods, the book is Meltdown. It's a New York Times bestseller. You can't put it down. Tom, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Judge.
I think I dropped my microphone here.
And I just wondered, Tom looks... Is he in his office with one of those little computer cameras? How does your show work?
Tom's on Skype, yeah.
It's on Skype.
Tom's
That's
on
the
Skype.
free market at work.
Yeah, there it
Absolutely.
is.
That's one of the things we haven't figured out how to regulate yet.
And what Thomas said was right on the money.
Right to it. Okay.
It's right on the money.
All right. I spent Friday evening in St. Louis addressing about 1,000 people at the Campaign for Liberty. And the young man who runs the Campaign for Liberty, or one of the people running it, and was with me, is a guy named Steve Bierfeld, who's going to be on with us in a couple of minutes. And on Monday morning, I emailed him and I said, because I left at 6 o'clock Saturday morning, how did the rest of the weekend go? and he had an encounter with the TSA.